Hi, this is Mark Grossarth from Heritage Family Credit Union. Heritage Family Credit Union is a proud sponsor of Bennington Chamber of Commerce Lunch and Learn series. I hope you find these seminars insightful and educational.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Erica Floriani, Membership Manager here at Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce, and you are at our inaugural 2021 Lunch and Learn. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to Heritage Family Credit Union for once again sponsoring our 2021 Lunch and Learn series. Great sponsors, and because of that, we can present this to you. So thank you to Heritage and to Mike Cutler there at Catamount Access Television for making us look as good as he can and having us live on Facebook. Before we get started, a little housekeeping for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. If you have any questions for the panel, please use your little raise your hand button, or if you want to talk in the chat, we'll be happy to relay your questions to the panel. And if you're watching us on Facebook, the same thing, you could type in your questions there, and if we have time, we'll get to as many questions as we can. So before we kick this off, this Lunch and Learn was called Money Talks Part 1, Small Business Accounting. Many of our members are small businesses, and they had a lot of questions as far as this goes. So we got this amazing panel together. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, their businesses, and then we'll move on to questions. So going in alphabetical order, first, Amanda Benway from Creative Solutions Bookkeeping.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Benway, and my business is Creative Solutions Bookkeeping. I'm located in East Dorset, Vermont. I do bookkeeping for small businesses, generally 5 employees or fewer. I also work with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs. I have built my business to kind of bridge the gap between a startup and going into like a full force business where you need to have an on-site bookkeeper. So I work anywhere between like 1 or 2 hours a week for clients to quarterly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And our own Vicki Danaska. Vicki.
Good. Yes, my name is Vicki Danaska, and I am the owner of Complete Bookkeeping Services. I'm in Arlington, Vermont. And I started my business in 2013, so I'm now going into my 8th year. And I do work for small businesses that are very small, where I do monthly reconciliations to businesses where I pay their bills. I help them with invoicing. I do their payroll and analyze financial reports for them. The software that I use is QuickBooks. I do both desktop and online version of QuickBooks. And with some of my clients, I do their payroll for them. And I also use outside services for payroll to do their payroll for them. So it's a wide variety of different things that I do for people. Okay?
Great. Thank you, Vicki. And last but not least, Amanda Tift, Edison Accounting.
Hello, I'm Amanda Tift. I own and operate Madison Accounting in Bennington, Vermont. I have a tiny little office on Union Street. I predominantly do tax preparation in this time of year. And then year round, I do bookkeeping for small businesses and payroll.
So great. And again, I appreciate you guys all joining us. This is a crazy time of year for all of you. So taking the time to join us is really appreciated. And I'm going to start off with a question, and I think I posed this to all of you in advance, but what would you say if you had just one piece of advice to give across the board for small business owners and bookkeeping? What would that be? And Amanda Benway, I'll start with you again.
Keep your personal spending separate from your business spending, please.
Great. And Vicki?
So I think cash flow is the most important thing. You need to have a good system to track all of your revenue and track your expenses. And you need to look at it. You need to, reconcile your accounts. You need to have a system where you look at it on a regular basis. And you need to understand that everything that you spend your money on, it is something that is going to help your bottom line. So really look at all of your expenses and If it doesn't contribute to your bottom line, then you shouldn't spend the money, is my opinion. Okay.
Great. And Amanda, I put you in an awkward position being last. I'm sorry.
That's okay. The thing I came up with is a little bit more tax oriented, but it definitely goes along the lines of bookkeeping. Yeah, track your mileage. That's the biggest thing that I see in the tax end of things that small businesses don't do that they should do regularly. In addition to the things that Amanda and Vicky said.
Mhm.
Great. Great. Well, I did have a person who's listening in as they're driving around pose a question, and that they are brand new to this. And what is to business ownership and to accounting? Is there a best type of system or software for managing a small business? Do you prefer, I know, Vicky, you mentioned you use QuickBooks.
Mhm.
Is that the preferred software?
I love QuickBooks. I think it gives you, you can make it very simple, or you can make it very complex. I think it does a lot of things for a lot of different companies. I highly recommend it.
I second that. I work now I've been in business 5 years. For the last 3 years, I've been doing QuickBooks online exclusively, and 100% recommend QuickBooks. And I second what Vicky says about it being as simple and as complex as you need it to be. It will grow with your business.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And with QuickBooks, you can manage your bank statements easier, right? You can
yes.
download
Yes.
your reconciliation, and that saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
That
I have
these people are in business to do business. They didn't get into it to be bookkeepers, but unfortunately, that's a necessary evil to have a successful business. And do we have any questions? I'm sorry, I'm trying to monitor this. And so another question we have from a business owner who has written in is that they would like to ask you which reports to run to determine if a business is eligible for the new PPP. And if a business receives a grant or loan, how are those recorded? And Amanda Tiff, I'll start with you this time.
And let me add just a startup question. Let's get to the PPP part. Let's just go more broadly. What are the best reports that a small business should be running weekly or monthly to know that everything's been paid or viable or whatever? So let's maybe start with that question of like, what are just general, I'm a small business owner, what should I be looking at and generating as an exercise for my own self? And then let's go into the PPP more question. Amanda Tiff, can we start with you?
Sure. So the first two biggies are the profit and loss statement, and you can run that weekly. You can run that monthly. Most people run them monthly or quarterly or annually. And then the second one would be the balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two vital ones to your business. Cash flow statement, as Vicky talks about, would be number 3.
Right. And you can set up a cash flow statement using Excel. You don't have to have an elaborate system. It's as simple as, if you want to look at it on a weekly basis, what's your beginning cash? What do you expect to come in this week? And what do you expect to pay out? And where do you end up at the end of the week? It can be as simple as that.
Great. Chris, thank you for joining us. Mr. Bates. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. I always enjoy these, and they're very, very informative.
Thank you. Matt, did we have any questions
Nope.
on here?
Not yet, but another question that I have, we kind of have to do it as a nonprofit and just something we inherited, but do you find that a lot of small businesses, make a budget, a yearly budget, 6-month budget, a COVID budget, or B, I would like small businesses to make a budget. And then I think that the tail end of that is around forecasting, right? So, we think we're going to come in here, we maybe come in here, or we come in here. Vicki, I know you do a lot of work with us at the chamber, just being able to first find that budget and have a 16 board directors agree on it and present it to the membership, which we just did last month. But then constantly, you and I are going back and forth, measuring ourselves against those goals. And why did that not happen? And usually we come up with some pretty good reasons about why we're higher or lower or right on point. But do you guys find that small businesses make budgets? Is that something, kind of as an industry standard you would recommend? And maybe Amanda Benway, we start with you on that.
Yeah, so I strongly encourage my clients to make a budget, and I work with my clients on how to make a budget. Most of them have no idea to begin with how to do that. This is generally, and this probably moves into the bigger companies as well, but because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and startups, I'm working with a lot of people and businesses who are sinking a lot of their own personal cash into their business to get it up and going. So we really need to watch every penny that goes in and out. And it also will help them determine how much money they need to be getting out of the business in order to survive and pay their own bills. So that is one of the services that I provide for my clients and encourage people how to do it. I've also made a couple of YouTube videos about budgeting and just kind of put it out there for the community. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to tell you how to look it up unless you just Google my name. But I am a huge fan of budgeting and then running budget versus actual reports as well. That's part of my monthly reporting that I send to my clients.
And do you just use Excel spreadsheets? I mean, do you just make it as simple as that?
So if somebody has QuickBooks data already, and if they're using QuickBooks Online, then I do it in QuickBooks with them so that we can do a budget versus actual report. And it's just a standardized report that we can pull. However, the YouTube video I made on how to do a budget was for simple bookkeeping, and it was in Excel. And I have a template up there as well.
Right.
Other thoughts on small business budgeting?
And the important thing, like you said, Matt, is, and I know you and I do this, is we make that budget, but we're looking at it all the time. I mean, we look at it, Matt and I sit down once a month and we review where we are against our budget. And then we're forecasting. So we're constantly looking at that information. We just don't put it on the shelf and say, there, the budget's done, let's move on. We're always comparing actuals to the budget.
And I think, it helps or whatever to have 16 directors that you have to report to, and small businesses don't. And so that's why I use the phrase an exercise. It's like when you do your home budget, no one's going to come and scold you at your home, whether you're, over or above or under. It's more that it's the exercise to get you to a goal that you want, which is a sustainable business model. And so you don't have directors, we have directors. But you may want to think of yourself as, having 16 directors to report to, and what do I want to report on every month? That I'm holding myself accountable and I'm making sure the business is viable. I know you had another question.
I did, and it will tie back into the PPP question we had earlier. And a lot of small business owners ran into this last year when they tried to file for PPP, and that is not paying themselves a salary. Is that something that all business owners should do? Like, okay, you didn't hit your goals, but you need to pay yourself a salary, or do you just say, put it all into the business first, and if there's some left over for you, go ahead?
I mean, I have clients that do both. I have clients that they're on, they do pay themselves on a routine basis. And then I have people that wait and see what they have left over at the end of the year. So it depends on the situation. If you can afford it, I would say pay yourself. That's why you're doing this, right? You're doing it to make money, to provide for your livelihood. Yes, absolutely.
And I think it did blindside a lot of business owners when that PPP rolled out, that they weren't able to file because they didn't have an actual receipt of what they earned themselves. So let's bounce back to that question from earlier. What reports should a small business know how to run in order to determine determine if they are eligible for PPP. So what should they be able to run for reports to?
So they need to look at their, well, first of all, they have to have 25% reduction in a quarter. So they compare their 2019 to their 2020 and look at each quarter, and it should be reduced by 25%. That's the first qualifier. So if you have a quarter that's 25% less, then you're eligible, and then you have to look at, then you've got to get the average payroll that you paid out for the year. So you look at your 12 months of payroll that you paid out, get the average and multiply that by 2.5, and that's how much you can borrow or how much you can get.
Restaurants were 3.5.
Oh, were they 3.5?
Lodging as well.
And they could use the higher of their payroll for either 2019 or 2020, whichever would get them more.
Right.
Yeah. So they'd essentially have to run both years of payroll to see where they fell.
Right.
And we're still waiting to see what this next package will look like and who's going to be eligible for what. Question from our members. A sole proprietorship versus incorporating. Pluses, minuses. We'll start with you, Mandy Tift. Sorry.
So if you're just starting up, a lot of times it's more cost beneficial to either be a sole proprietor or an LLC. It also depends on kind of what the assets are that you need to protect in your business. Incorporating, there's a lot to discuss before taking that step. I haven't worked with any companies that have started as a corporation. That's more when they grow, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Most of the people I have are LLCs. People usually form an LLC. That's what I see.
And then once their net is high enough, then it makes sense to switch to an S corp or a C corp.
Mm-hmm. Right.
One of the things that you have to keep in mind if you're thinking about becoming incorporated is that you have to run payroll.
Yes.
That's a big thing that a lot of startups don't know. They just hear the words and they know that there are tax benefits to becoming incorporated. You have to run payroll. They will nail you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. We have another question coming in, and again, those on the Zoom call, feel free to raise a hand, a digital hand, a real hand, or just write in the chat function. We'll try and get to those, and those watching on Facebook as well. We'll get to those questions too if you're watching this and not in the Zoom call, but we see you on Facebook. Ask a question, put it in the comment box. But we have one around budgeting again. What categories do you use? Any general recommendations for how much to allocate for each one? Should spend some time on that. So let's start with Amanda Tift, and then we'll go to Amanda Benway and then Vicki.
For budgeting, I would definitely use the categories that are in your profit and loss statement that you use every single year, and look at your prior year's income and expenses in order to generate what you think you're going to use in the year following. If you're just starting out, that's a harder question, and it's more of guesstimates more than anything.
Amanda Benway?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Amanda said. Also, if you're just starting out, what you can do is put into your budget your ideals. You're going to want to start with income. What do you think you're going to be making, or what would you like to be making? And then just jot down your expense categories. You've got some what we'll call fixed expenses, and that would be like your shop space rent, your insurance, your phone, your internet. These are your standard bills that are going to come out every month. You're pretty well going to know what those are. And then you're going to have some ones that you're going to guess on, and that's going to be like your advertising, your payroll, your cost of goods sold. That all depends on what type of business you have. And then you need to put the formulas in. I'm assuming we're talking about in Excel. you're going to put the formulas in to show the bottom line, and you want that to be a profit. And ideally, you want that to be a profit that is also going to afford the lifestyle that you want. So if you're showing a negative at the bottom, there's only two things you can do, right? You can increase your income or decrease your expenses. That's all you can do. So you play around with those numbers in there. If you want to learn more about how to do an Excel budget, Google my name, Amanda Benway, in YouTube, and it should come up with a screen share of an Excel and everything.
Vicky, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what I do is, yes, you do your revenue, that's the first line. Then your cost of goods sold. So what is the cost of, say you have a gift shop. So you've got your revenue of your sales, then your cost of goods sold for your product that you buy. Then I break it down into what is my operating cost, and then what is my occupancy cost, and then what's my admin, and what's my payroll. So those are the broad buckets that I use. And then, so occupancy would be all if you're renting the space or if you own the space, all your utility bills. Your operating would be things like supplies to run your business. If you have to buy packaging material, if you have an online store, that sort of thing. Admin would be things that, office supplies, that sort of thing. So that's how I break mine down when I do it.
I like
Now,
that.
Vicki, we talked about payroll briefly, and I know that you do both. You do both run payroll for companies and you recommend. With all the changes that happen with payroll and taxes and things of that nature on the federal and state level, if you're a small business owner, would you, and you haven't taken the time to get a bookkeeper, which we highly recommend. That's why we're doing panel discussion, and all these ladies are available. You can go to our directory on our website and get more information. I think they're going to put their contact information in the chat for everyone. But do you feel it's money well spent for a small business owner to go ahead and hire a payroll service so that the liabilities of misinformation or misfiling is not on their shoulder?
Yes, I do. I think it's money well spent. They do. So you just have to provide to them your hours, right? And then they run the payroll for you. They do all the direct deposits. They help you with tax questions. They can do all the deductions. So say if you have a 401k program set up, they can set it, they can set up all those deductions, all your health insurance deductions. And then they do all the quarterlies, which to me is, that right there is great because they do all the quarterlies for you. You don't have to deal with any quarterlies. Also, from a cash flow standpoint, they file the taxes that are due if you have a biweekly payroll, they're doing those taxes and they're filing them on a biweekly basis. So then you don't have a big bill at the end of the quarter to have to pay your taxes. The other nice thing is if you get a letter from the state of Vermont or the IRS, what I do is I just pass it right on to their tax department and they answer that letter for us. So we don't have to even answer the letters from the tax departments. So I highly recommend doing the tax service or doing the payroll service.
Makes it a little easier for reporting, I would imagine, when it gets to Mandy for doing tax returns. We do have another question. What is a reasonable expense for a small business owner to spend on a payroll service and or for bookkeeping services? I mean, how many hours do you feel that you need to spend with a small business owner in order to keep them on track and keep them informed of their financial situation and health? We'll start with Amanda Benway.
That's a super tough one to answer. Every client of mine is different. It depends on your needs because I offer several different levels of packages of service. At minimum, you probably want your bookkeeper to do your bank reconciliations because that's kind of a double check that everything is going in where it should be. And you probably want to have a meeting with them about once a month, and that's going to take a few hours of their time. Payroll service varies on how many employees you have and how detailed it is. I think 125 a month is about the average that my clients are paying for payroll, but it does vary. Bookkeeping services, I honestly would rather not say in this forum. It's really, it's personal between the business and the bookkeeper.
Fair enough. And the initial meeting with any business owner is going to be a little bit more of an expense up front, because you need to sit down, have that conversation, find out what their needs are and what they need from you and what you need from them in order to reach the goal that they want from you as well. So that initial startup is probably going to be a little bit more. And as you do the maintaining through the next few months or years, then it becomes less and less. Right?
Yes, you definitely save money over time, because once you get into the flow of everything and once you have good, clean books, maintaining good, clean books is significantly cheaper than cleaning them up.
True.
What's
And what's so nice is at the end of the year, you take a copy of your QuickBooks and you give it to your tax person, and it's all there. You're not scrambling around trying to put it all together.
Agreed. So a bookkeeper will also save you money with your accountant, because you're not paying your accountant, who is much more expensive, to do that cleanup work. You are handing your accountant clean books and everybody's happy.
Right.
What's some of mildly coming out of COVID, still in COVID a little bit, but absolutely after last year, what are some of, I don't know what a better term, but horror stories or pitfalls or challenges you have seen? And you don't have to mention clients by name, obviously, but what are some of the things that you just like, oh, wow, if we had gotten to this sooner, but COVID really brought it to light where people were or weren't in their bookkeeping? You have any stories or any, I guess, examples that, somebody on the call or watching on Facebook might say, that might be me in the future. So any war stories over the last year? And Vicki, I'll start with you. We'll go to maybe Amanda Benway after, and then Amanda Tift. And don't use the chamber as an example, Vicki.
So if you don't have information in QuickBooks, I'll use that because that's what I use. We were able to apply for our PPP loans very quickly because we have the information in there. That's all we had to do was run the reports. We didn't have to scramble to say, oh my God, what was my revenue, or what are my expenses? What did I do in 2020? We kept up with everything, just ran reports. We had our information very, very quickly. So that's the key, again, is getting that information organized in some sort of system and looking at it and staying on top of it. That's the biggest thing.
Amanda Tift, any war stories? I mean, you're probably going right into it now with tax season, so.
I'm sure I'll see my fair share in the next 2-3 months. But I don't have any off the top of my head that's already happened over the course of the year. Just more of what Vicki said. Information wasn't completely ready, and that held up applications and stuff for the PPP and the EIDLs and stuff.
Amanda Benway?
I don't have any horror stories, thankfully. I think that the biggest struggle that everybody had was, like Amanda and Vicki said, was with the PPPs and the grants and everything. It's just, I feel like I have more sad stories. Just businesses are struggling and they're stressed, and thank goodness for all of these grants and everything that are coming out. It's keeping their doors open, but barely, right? They're stressed about when is the next one going to come out, because it's the only way that I'm staying afloat. My clients were able, just like Vicki's, to be able to apply for everything very quickly because we had the data in there. That's about it. If you have the data, you can get to the stuff, especially that PPP, which is first come, first serve. We were able to get those in very fast, and that was huge. And thankfully, we don't have any nightmares. I'm feeling a lot of the stress of my clients too. They're wondering if they should even bother keeping their doors open, some of them at this point.
Yeah.
Now, we've all talked a little bit about the P&L statement, the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, a little bit about trial balance. So I'm going to give each one of you one of those categories to explain what they are and what the difference is and why that report is important. So Amanda, Tiff, we're going to start with you and we're going to give you a P&L. Can you explain exactly the P&L?
Get the easy one. Thank you. So the profit and loss statement is just basically your profit at the top, your cost of goods, which is everything that goes into making your product, or you'd have less if you're a service industry, but and then after that, it lists your expenses, and at the very bottom, you have a net income of what's left over at the end. That's it in a nutshell.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Amanda Benway, I'm going to give you balance sheet.
Okay.
The importance of the balance sheet.
Okay, so your balance sheet is a different animal than your profit and loss, but it's just as important. It's showing your assets and your liabilities. So if you invest in something like a property or a vehicle, that's going to show on your balance sheet, as well as any debt that you have is going to show on your balance sheet. Some of the important features to look at on your balance sheet are it's going to show your accounts receivable amount, because that's money that you know that you are going to get, or you certainly hope you're going to get. You have invoiced for it, you're expecting to get it, but it has not hit your bank account yet. That can help you in your budgeting. It's also going to show money that you owe, like your long-term liabilities. That's also where your PPP loan is going to sit before it gets forgiven. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that.
I'd argue that the balance sheet is more important than the profit and loss in terms of the whole business itself.
Seeing your financial health of your business is, that's where you would see it, because the P&L is more like a snapshot of what's happening right now. Vicki, unfair, but trial balance to you.
That's right. Okay, that's basically just, so you've got all your assets and your fixed assets on one side, and then on the other side you've got your what you owe, basically, in a very simplistic term. What you have, your assets, what you have, including your bank statements, and the other side is what you owe. You may owe bills, credit cards, loans, and what your equity is. Very simplistic terms. Okay.
One that wasn't added to that, but we've mentioned already, I know it was somewhat, pretty important for us and transformative as we explored it more, was the cash flow. And I know, Vicki, you've worked with us on a version of that. I'm sure there's many ways to report or look at that. But that, it's, as Erica said, the P&L being a snapshot maybe of your month during COVID, and definitely at the most kind of chaotic part of COVID, March through June, March through August. It was really important for us, at least at the chamber, to be looking weekly at what the fuel bill was, the printer bill, when that was going to come in, and the cash flow that we had coming in from events or lack of events or membership dues. So for us, we're a nonprofit, it's a little bit different, but you guys would be looking at your product or your services, or you're under contract to perform a service in this future month. Well, we were able to really, and importantly, get ourselves to the end of, at certain points, it was the end of the quarter. Then we got brave and got to the end of 6 months. And then we said, look, we can probably project all the way to the end of the year. That's just something we had never done. I know it's been the request of some of our board directors, but I think Vicki and I would attest that in some ways I like that a little bit more, having to answer, the buck stops with me and the buck stops with you as a small business owner. No one, everybody's going to be looking to you, the staff, the wife maybe, or the husband who wants you to bring home the bacon. They're going to be looking to you. And so it's nice to be able to go through that exercise, be able to say, I know exactly what the fuel bill is or the healthcare bill is, and I know when it's coming in. And I also know by week, hopefully projection wise, I know what's coming in terms of revenue. So just as I kind of explained that, anything else that the two Amandas or Vicki want to add to cash flow? You may not need to do it, but maybe during crisis, it's a really good report to also have as well.
Yeah, one of the things, my clients are very busy. They're very busy doing what they do, what they love to do. And I have several of them say to me, where's my money? How come I have no cash, right? Well, then you've got to look at, well, how much do you pull out of your business? How much are you buying equipment? You know, just because you're doing well on your revenue line and maybe your bottom line is good, you really have to look at where are you spending your money? You know, it's very important to stay on top of that.
We're going to go back to the PPP for a minute because quite a few people on the call and on the Zoom have received some of that grant money. And one of the question is, how do you record that? Very simple. You got the money. How's it recorded in your system? And when you receive the money, how do you itemize where you've spent it? So Amanda Benway, we'll start with you.
Sure. So initially the PPP is a loan. So you have to record it as such. So that's going to sit on your balance sheet when you bring it in, and you're going to enter it in as your double entry would be into the bank account and then into a loan account. Okay. So you're not going to see it on your profit and loss. It's a loan until it's forgiven. I don't know the answer. Amanda Tift would probably be better about this, is where to put it after it's forgiven. I believe most accountants are asking to see it as well as the grants in other income so that it's separated from your revenue. But Amanda will, as an accountant, will know better about that. What was the other part to your question? I'm sorry. How to itemize what you're spending it on. So if you're using a good accounting system like QuickBooks, that is your itemization. You're going to be able to see where it comes out. The PPP loan is intended primarily to keep people on your payroll. So your payroll reports are going to show how you spent that money, how it came out of the bank. That's not going to be a problem. You're also recording your utilities, because those are the other things that you can put it for, and QuickBooks can run a report for whatever time period the forgiveness side is asking for. We can easily pull a report that shows that. If you're not using an accounting system like QuickBooks, I would 100% track every single penny that you spent that PPP loan on, because I'm not sure what the banks are going to be looking for if you're not using QuickBooks or a similar.
I would think at bare minimum, the banks would want an Excel with documents of everything that you spent the money on, and then a zero at the bottom.
Yeah.
To make
So
sure.
I've actually applied. I've got a couple of clients that actually have gotten their loans forgiven, and we had to actually send them in all the payroll reports for each payroll that we did. We had to send the bank statement showing that the money came out of the bank. Okay. So all those documents had to go to the bank, and they had to see all of that. So they had to see where you spend it and how it came out of your bank.
Amanda Tiff, a quick question for reporting on your balance sheet and on your P&L.
Yes.
Cash reporting versus accrual reporting. Advantages, disadvantages of each?
Oh boy. So they both depend on what type of business you're using. Retail establishments might be more cash based because the money is coming in on any given day, and that's when it needs to be recorded. And expenses on that end will be expensed when you pay them. On the accrual side of things, I would say more service-based businesses could use accrual because the income is logged when the service happens, not necessarily when it's paid, and the same with expenses.
Right. It's when it's recognized. Right. When you recognize that income or recognize that expense, not necessarily when you actually pay it. Yes.
Correct. With accrual, accounts receivable and accounts payable, those are two big reports with accruals that end up coming in and playing. Those would be like the next batch of important forms.
Right.
And we do have a question, Jennifer, from Hoffman Real Estate.
So as far as the cash versus accrual method goes, is there a requirement that if you're, say, going into an S Corp, that you have to use one or the other method?
No. And if But if you're starting as one, you need to stay that way.
Mhm.
You don't get to switch back and forth. And if you do, there's forms and documents that the IRS needs to note that.
And I'll make it even simpler, and hopefully I'm the simplest one on this call. Let's just talk about actual what accrual is and what cash is. And maybe Vicky, you start. I mean, it's a pretty simple answer, but sometimes, I mean, even I get messed up on that. So what's
Okay.
what's
So
cash?
when you have an accrual system and you invoice people, that's when you recognize the revenue, not when you get paid. So in the cash system, you're recognizing when you actually receive that payment, right?
Cash on hand.
Yeah, cash on hand. And also on accrual, so say you let me think of an example. Say you property tax bill. Okay, property tax bill is 12 months. On an accrual system, you're going to recognize that expense over the months that that bill is covering. So maybe the bill covers July to June of the next year. So in year 20, you're going to recognize the expense from July to December, and then you'll put it as a prepaid for the amounts for January to June. So that's on the expense side. Where on a cash side, you recognize that expense when you pay that bill. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know it's always tricky. It's always tricky to think about it.
Knowing it and teaching it are two different things.
Yeah.
And that's why we have you guys here. So we can learn the general about it, but you guys can get into the nuts and bolts.
Mhm.
Are there any more questions from anybody here on the Zoom call, any of our members?
There was some questions about the PPP loans and how those get recorded. Can I go back to that for just a quick second? So what Amanda was saying earlier about recording it as other income when it gets forgiven is absolutely right. And that also goes into any of the grants that you received should probably really be listed in other income as well. And if any of them had you fill out a W-9, expect it to be taxable.
Mhm.
I think the EIDL was the only, on the PPP, were the only ones that are not taxable. Just about every other one I've seen has been that way.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Great, thanks,
Great
Amanda.
information.
Final questions, and we can always wrap this up. You know, I think our encouragement from Eric and me, at least, is an endorsement of these three terrific panelists here. We can't answer every question on this one call, nor, you know, and I think Amanda Benway brought it up, nor is all the topics, you know, approachable on a public platform like this. Part of the point of this is to give you a taste and feel and saying, oh, wow, I do need all those things. And wow, that does make a good, make good sense in order to invest in a bookkeeper or an accountant. And so we really encourage you to head on over to each one of the panelists' website or get in touch with Erica, who can put you in touch with them personally, and definitely start to chart a path forward with Amanda, or Vicky. But before we go, any final questions for our great panelists today? All right. Well, we will wrap up.
Yes, and I want to thank you all again for joining us, and Amanda, Vicky, during this very, very busy time. We will be back again next month, continuing to cover small business financial needs with small business investing. Not only investing while you're making the money, but looking towards retirement, because that's the goal for everybody. And we want to get there. So join us for that. That is going to be happening March 24th. And again, it will be on Zoom and Facebook Live. But on March 10th, for our members only, we are having a popping conversation. It's called Cross Promotion, Winning Through Partnerships. So if you can join us for that, head on over to our website, sign up for that. That's going to be March 10th. Again, thank you all for joining us. It was very informative, and I encourage you, like Matt, to reach out to all these ladies.
Mhm.
Yes.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the week.